Hey guys, it's Joel Williams and Chase Elleby coming to you today from Williams Elleby with video number 20 in our series of 52 weeks of personal injury. Today we want to talk to you about what you should do after you're hit by an uninsured driver. So Chase, what's step number one?
So I guess step number one would be find out whether or not the person that hit you is in fact an uninsured driver. Okay, so it's hard to even know that if you get hit and you're at the scene, because a lot of times what happens is people might have that insurance card and we don't know whether that insurance is expired, whether or not that insurance applies to that car, whether or not that driver even has permission to be driving that vehicle to where insurance would even apply, right? So being uninsured or being hit by an uninsured driver could mean a handful of different things. Obviously the first one being that there is in fact no insurance on the car, the other thing being that the person is not authorized to drive. So one, we got to find that out. We do that by either looking at the police report, sending a letter to the insurance company to get the deck page to find out if that person's a proper driver. But once we do find out if it's an uninsured driver, and we do this anyway, but it's to notify your own insurance company that you've been involved in a wreck. Yep. Notice is by far the number one thing. Even if we think or know that the at-fault driver has insurance, we're always putting on notice the uninsured motorist, which is your own insurance company.
Yeah, and you have to do that promptly, right? If you can't wait 8 months to notify your insurance company and expect them not to give you pushback on your duties and your requirements under your own insurance policy.
Right.
Because chances are that your own insurance policy puts a obligation on you to notify your insurance company promptly or within a reasonable amount of time after a wreck so that they will have a fair opportunity to investigate the wreck on their end as well. And if you wait too long, I would say after 6 months, you're going to start running into some big problems, maybe even sooner. But if you can, within a day or two, go ahead and notify your insurance company. You don't have to give them a bunch of details about the extent of your injuries and all that. Just let them know about the wreck. And then call an attorney as soon as possible and let that attorney deal with your insurance company so you don't get tricked into answering a bunch of questions the wrong way or in a way that might hurt your case later on down the road. But for sure, you've got to notify them as soon as possible. And also, I'll just give you an example. So with a traveler's policy, there's additional obligations that you have to abide by, and that would include immediately notifying the police or proper law enforcement authority by the quickest means of communication after an accident if a hit and run driver or an unidentified vehicle is involved, or if the accident results in death to an insured person. So a lot of times we run into cases where we don't have a clue who the at-fault driver was, right? And so what, at least under this traveler's policy, what it's saying is you've got to notify the cops by the quickest means available. Like pick up your cell phone, call them, let them know what's going on. So, and I'm guessing the idea behind this is so that they'll have the best opportunity to catch and apprehend or find the person who caused this wreck. Because if it is a phantom driver, there are additional things that you have to prove in order to get coverage.
Right, exactly. You know, because most insurance companies, they lead you to believe that every single claim there's got to be some sort of fraud involved, right? That's kind of like the message that insurance companies send out. Like it's all a big game, it's all fraud. But the one thing they have, their radar up for is hit and run, right? The phantom drivers. So you got to have either an independent witness that says, oh yeah, they were in fact hit by a driver that sped off, or property damage to show and prove that, like paint transfer or something like that, that it was a rogue vehicle that did hit you and run off, because they don't want you basically, backing your car into a lamppost and then saying you got hit by someone and they sped off. You have no idea what happened or where they went.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand too that when you're doing anything with your own insurance, it's all governed by that contract, right? It's all governed by that policy that no one has ever read. They send you that booklet once you sign up, and it's a big thing of, 20 so pages that you look at. Okay, this is from State Farm. I'm going to stick it in my folder of important documents that I'll never go back and look at until you're in a wreck, right? So everything's governed by the contract, and it tells you what you need to do at certain times. And we deal with this all day, every day. But it's important to look that over. I mean, I wouldn't say go pull it up right now, but it's important to look it over, especially after a wreck, to know what your obligations and duties are under that specific contract. Now, that's not the same with the at-fault insurance company. I tell clients all the time, if the at-fault insurance company's calling you, wanting a statement, wanting this, that, and the other, you don't have to give them any of that. They're not entitled to any of that. Well, your own insurance company, they may be, right? So it's very important to look over that policy to see what it calls for.
Yep. I think another thing that's important to do, especially if you are insured by a mutual company like State Farm, is to gather all of the policies that you have, because there's a difference between, say, a Progressive and a State Farm when it comes to coverage, right? So Progressive is going to include all of the vehicles that you have insured under the same policy, meaning that if you have $50,000 of coverage, it's going to apply to all those vehicles, and there's just going to be that 50.
Right.
If you have State Farm writes a separate policy for every vehicle that's in your household, right? So if you've got a vehicle, your spouse has a vehicle, your adult kid has a vehicle, and your mother lives with you and has a vehicle, and they're all insured by State Farm, there's going to be 4 separate policies that you could add on to each other to provide you with more coverage. So it's important to make sure that you identify all of those policies. And if you're going to meet with an attorney, let the attorney know about all those vehicles, because believe it or not every attorney knows that you can stack those policies up, and they might just think that you have coverage from a single policy.
Right, and similarly, it's not just like State Farm, for instance, or a mutual company. You could be in a household with your aunt and your uncle or your grandmother, and they might have, say, an Allstate policy or a Geico policy, and you might have a State Farm policy. Mm-hmm. Well, it's important to get that information too, because most all of your common insurance companies have what's called the resident relative exception to who's covered under those uninsured motorist contracts, mm-hmm. right? So if Joel and I were brothers and we had different auto policies and I get in a wreck, well, I could use his Allstate policy to cover my injuries on top of whatever I may have, because we're relatives and we live in the same household. And a lot of attorneys don't know about that. A lot of clients, when we ask them, hey, who else lives in your household with you, so we can put that insurance company on notice as well, because that's an extra layer of coverage that might be available depending on the severity of the injuries.
Yeah, and I think it's important to gather all that information before you go to speak with an attorney, because if you don't tell the attorney about that, they're not going to know.
Yeah.
They're going to have no idea.
They should be asking, but right, they're not.
Yeah, they should be asking, but like I said, they're not all going to ask, so you need to make sure they know about it so you don't leave any money on the table.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other things you can think of that there's some obvious things. If you're hit by an uninsured driver, do what you would do if you were hit by an insured driver. Seek medical treatment.
Right.
Take pictures, document the scene, treat it the same way as if the other person had $1 bazillion of insurance, because what's going to happen is if you end up having to file a claim against an uninsured driver, your own insurance company is going to defend that case against you. Mm-hmm. And they're going to more than likely answer either in their own name or in the name of the at-fault driver. Meaning if they answer in the name of the at-fault driver, it's going to be you versus at-fault driver, but what it really is you versus your own insurance company. Right. So you're going to have to prove the exact same stuff you would have to prove if the at-fault driver had a bunch of insurance. So seek treatment, stay consistent with your treatment, document the scene. All of these things that we've talked about in other videos as part of this series, you also need to do if you're hit by an uninsured driver.
Yep. That's it.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up week 20 of our video series of 52 weeks of personal injury. If this video has been helpful to you, we appreciate you giving us a thumbs up, subscribing to our page, or inserting any comments that you have in the section below. Otherwise, we will see you next week for video number 21.